Hello everybody, my name is Tazmyn May from the channel Tea Books and Tazmyn, and welcome back to Penguin Platform. Today I'm going to give you so many Chinese literature recommendations that you are going to have to read them all and diversify the hell out of your shelves. Penguin is currently running an amazing program that I'm obsessed with called Lit in Colour, so I will leave all of the details to that down below, and this is me doing my part in helping you learn about books written by people that aren't white and old and dead and from the 1800s. And I hope you enjoy! All of the timestamps for different genres will be down below. I'm going to be covering classics, modern classics, fantasy, sci-fi / dystopian, literary fiction, thriller / mystery, memoir, other non-fiction, young adult. I'll also have some articles linked down below for children's picture books. While researching this video, I found so many amazing books that I'd never heard of before. So if you want even more recommendations in the future, please follow the link down in the description to my channel, where I will be making an even longer video talking about all of the other ones that I'm not going to be able to get to in this one. To get myself in the mood, I've got myself a big mug of jasmine pearl tea from the famous Chinese company Tea Pigs. So to start off, I want to tell you about two famous Chinese classics, stories that I've grown up with. They own every goddamn fibre of my body. These stories to me were like the Grimm fairy tales to the children of Europe. The first one I want to talk about, Penguin actually has two different translations of, and that is a story that I know as Journey to the West and has recently been retranslated and published as Monkey. This one up here is the Penguin Clothbound Classics edition called Monkey, which is translated by Julia Lovell, and it is the most recent translation. And this one, which is conveniently enough also called Monkey, I thought this one was The Journey to the West, but regardless, the story is The Journey to the West. And this one is translated by Arthur Waley. So The Journey to the West is a massive series of books that are not covered in both of these translations. I'm pretty sure these are some of the most famous stories. These stories follow four main characters. There is a monk, there is the Monkey King, there is Pigsy, who is like a creepy pig man, and a depressive sound monster, just for good measure. These are sort of children's fairy tales, and there are other folklore characters that come into these as well. If you've watched the Over the Moon film on Netflix, the characters from that are at some point in these books. I don't feel like I'm doing a very good way of summarizing it right now, so let me just read you something from Penguin's website. A shape-shifting trickster on a kung fu quest for eternal life, Monkey King is one of the most memorable superheroes in world literature. High-spirited and omni-talented, he can transform himself into whatever he chooses, but his penchant for mischief repeatedly gets him into trouble, and when he raids the Heaven's Orchard of Immortal Peaches, the Buddha pins him beneath a mountain. 500 years later, Monkey King is finally given a chance to redeem himself. He must protect the pious monk Tripitaka in search of the precious Buddhist sutras that will bring enlightenment to the Chinese Empire. Joined by two other fallen immortals, Pigsy, a rice-loving flying pig, and Sandy, a depressive river sand monster, Monkey King does battle with this person, that person, and lots of people. So, he is a little shit. I remember me and my brother, one of my brothers in particular, watching a TV version of The Journey to the West growing up. There was a live action version that I remember. There was an animated version that I remember. It was all just hilarious. These bizarre characters getting up to the most ridiculous hijinks. As the synopsis said, one of the most renowned superheroes in world history. I highly recommend it. I don't know which of these translations would necessarily be the best, but in recent years there have been a lot of new translations by women of classics that have previously only ever been translated by men, like the Odyssey was recently translated by Emily Watson, I believe. So I would maybe recommend going for the Clothbound Classic version that's been translated by Julia Lovell, but don't hold me to that. I'm not an academic. I just enjoy content to do with flying pigs and mischievous monkeys. He's the love of my life. He was my first love. Oh, I don't think I mentioned the author is Wu Cheng'en. The next classic I want to tell you about is another one that over the years has got many different names. I grew up knowing it as A Dream of Red Mansions. It is also famously known as Dream of Red Chamber, and this edition by Penguin is released as The Story of Stone. Now this is a massive series by Cao Xueqin and has been, in this version, split into 5 volumes, translated by David Hawkes. Congratulations, that is a lot of text to get through, my god. As I looked into this, I became somewhat confused because what I remember of it is different from what it says is the main plot. But as it's such a long series, well, actually, it's technically one novel. It's just fat. I must have become familiar as a child with a particular part of the episodic that it is. Essentially, it follows two incredibly wealthy families that live in adjacent family compounds in the capital, and about the goings-on between them. What I remember distinctly is there being a really, really tragic, almost like comparable to Romeo and Juliet sort of love story. But looking it up here, it says on Wikipedia, and it makes sense with the new title, The Story of Stone. There's a sentient stone that was left over by a goddess mended in the heavens eons ago, and wants to enjoy the pleasures of red dust, aka the mundane world. So it seems to have some sort of fantastical element to it as well. How on earth that stone comes into, you know, the day-to-day goings-ons of these two families, I don't know. Fuck off. Oh my god! Oh my god, I did not know that. Wow, your girl's a dumb bitch. So apparently, the stone, when it enters the human realm, becomes the character Jia Yu. That character is one of the heads of like these, one of the households. Oh my god, I didn't know! Wow, I feel dumb! Jia Yu means precious jade, which is where the new name, The Story of Stone, comes from. My god! Wow! My childhood has just exploded before my very eyes. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with these next few because they're ones that I learnt about on my journey into researching this video. But I did want to let you know that these books exist so that you could add them to your TBR, do a bit of research, and then maybe you can tell me to read it in the future and we can swap jobs. The first of which is Strange Tales from a Chinese Studio by Pu Songling, translated by John Minford. The next is a collection of short stories which is bound up in this edition by Penguin. This collection is called The Real Story of Akio and Other Tales from China, The Complete Fiction of Lu Xun, by Lu Xun and translated by Julia Lovell, who is the person who is doing the new edition of Monkey. And finally, for the classic section, 6 Records of a Floating Life by Shen Fu, which is translated by Leonard Pratt, and it doesn't have the writing in Chinese, so I'm going to have to guess at the pronunciation here with the inflections. My gut instinct is saying Tiang Su Hui, but it could be Tiang Su Hui or literally anything else. Now onto modern classics. The first one that I'm going to tell you is one that is an adult book, but then there was a famous version which I believe is printed by Puffin now. The adult version is called Falling Leaves, The True Story of an Unwanted Chinese Daughter. And the children's version is called Chinese Cinderella, both of which are memoirs by Adeline Yen Ma, written in English, so no translator. This is absolutely devastating, heartbreaking, no. So Adeline is the youngest of her siblings, and her mother died in childbirth, which meant that her family believed that she was cursed, so she was shunned, she was hated, her siblings abused her, everyone loathed her. It's described here as a story of greed, hatred and jealousy, a domestic drama that is played against the extraordinary political events in China and Hong Kong. The original adult book, Falling Leaves, was published in 1997, and then Chinese Cinderella was published in 1999. There are then sequels to Chinese Cinderella. There are, I believe, 3 books that are all aimed at children. Absolutely devastating, but the child's version is obviously child-friendly, so give it a go. Next, I want to recommend a particular author. Now, this is Eileen Chung, and I have 3 books here written down by her that are all in the Penguin Modern Classics. First of all, which is one that I have, is Love in a Fallen City, which is translated by Karen S. Kingsbury. This is a collection of short stories. Next is Half a Lifelong Romance, which is also translated by Karen S. Kingsbury, and it is a novel about a love affair. Finally, for her books, I have Lust, Caution, translated by Julia Lovell. Again, she keeps on popping up everywhere. Wows. And this is a novel about espionage. On to the fantasy! Now, this book has been called The Chinese Lord of the Rings. The series is called The Legend of the Condor Heroes, and book 1 is A Hero Born. The series is written by Jin Yong, and the translator is Anna Homewood. So far, I believe there are 4 books out, but only 3 of them have been translated into English. It's set in China during 1200 AD. It is a high-scale epic fantasy with betrayal and invasion and enemies and a Genghis Khan. There is magic, there are destiny destinies that need to be fulfilled. There is love and romance and murder and tragedy. Next, I want to recommend a much more recent book, and that is Jade City by Fonda Lee, which is book 1 in the Green Bone saga. Book 1 came out in 2017, and I believe book 3 is coming out this year in 2021. It's been described here on Goodreads as a gripping Godfather-esque saga of intergenerational blood feuds, vicious politics, magics, and kung fu. Magics? Lots of magic. Lots of magic. And of course, how could I talk about adult fantasy without recommending The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang? Now, this book has every single trigger warning that any piece of literature can contain, so look up trigger warnings before going into this. It's an epic fantasy trilogy inspired by the Sino-Japanese War in China, and it's been compared to, in writing style and scope, to N.K. Jemisin and Robin Hobbs. One thing that I really love is the representation within Chinese people in this. So Rin, the main character, is a dark-skinned Chinese person. Now, my family are of the Han ethnic group, but then because China is so massive, there are loads and loads of ethnic minorities. You probably have heard about the fact that we have loads of different languages throughout China, but there are also people of different ethnic groups too. And Rin is of a darker-skinned ethnic group, and she's the main character, so I feel like the representation is just, amazing. Next, on to sci-fi / dystopia. I want to talk about China Dream by Ma Jian. This book has been very controversial in China. I believe it might have even been banned? Probably. It has probably been banned. It is a hot take on Xi Jinping's China today about being in a totalitarian state, about repression and violence and brainwashing. Oh, Margaret Atwood likes it. We follow a lecherous and corrupt party official who is about to get promoted to his dream job, but as he's about to get to the top of the Chinese Communist Party, he starts to get flashbacks to the Cultural Revolution, which is a time that my family actually lived through themselves, so I know an awful lot about that, and it was absolutely ghastly, disgusting, horrendous, every sort of awful possible. He starts to remember things from then, and his sanity starts to unravel, and I believe he starts to see flaws in the party that he has supported for so long. It's categorized on Goodreads as science fiction and dystopia and historical fiction, I assume, with the flashbacks. Oh, and it's translated by Flora Drew. I forgot to mention that. Thank you, Flora! The New York Times says that it may be the purest distillation yet of Mr. Ma's talent for probing the country's darkest corners and exposing what he regards as the Communist Party's moral failings. The next book I want to talk about is The Day the Sun Died by Yan Liangke, translated by Carlos Rojas. Now, this is a book that I didn't know about until I went into my little deep dive, and bitch, this person has written so much. When I was stalking this person on Wikipedia the other day, so many of this author's works have been banned in mainland China. Again, on Goodreads, this is listed as sci-fi / dystopia, but set in a modern society, I believe. Another very famous Chinese writer called Zhang Rong, who I will come back to later, said about this book, the reality of life in China today contrasts with the sunny optimism of the Chinese dream in this gripping, gruesome dystopia from one of the masters of modern Chinese literature. The whole book spans one night when the main character, a 14-year-old boy, starts to notice that things are going strange in his town. As the sun starts to set, he notices people from his village walking around, and they're like dream walking, sleepwalking, and things start to get weird. So the whole premise of the story is that the boy and his father are trying to convince the sun to rise again. The final sci-fi book that I want to recommend is The Three-Body Problem by Liu Cixin, translated by Ken Liu, who is also a very famous Chinese-American writer. The Three-Body Problem is book 1 in the Remembrance of Earth's Past series, and let me read you the blurb from Goodreads because it will be far more succinct than I will ever be. Set against the backdrop of China's Cultural Revolution, a secret military project sends signals out into space to try and establish contact with aliens. An alien civilization on the brink of destruction captures the signal and plans to invade Earth. Meanwhile, on Earth, different camps start forming, planning to either welcome the superior beings and help them take over a world that they see as corrupt, or to fight against the invasion. The result is a science fiction masterpiece of enormous scope and vision. Moving on to young adult books now, the first one that I want to recommend to you is Girl in Translation by Jean Kwok. Jean is a Chinese-American author, and I believe this was her debut novel. Yes, this was her debut novel. The book follows a young girl called Kimberly who emigrates to Brooklyn from Hong Kong with her mother. And by day, the girl is trying to fit in with society, get on with that American dream lifestyle. But at night, she is having to work in sweatshops just to be able to get by. It is said here that through Kimberly's story, author Jean Kwok, who also emigrated from Hong Kong as a young girl, brings to the page the lives of countless immigrants who are caught between the pressure to succeed in America, their duty to their family, and their own personal desires, exposing a world that we rarely ever hear about. The next young adult book that I want to recommend to you is Chinglish by Su Chuang. This book is written in a diary format, very much sort of like Georgia Nicholson vibes. This book follows a teenager who is being brought up in Coventry in England, and Jo lives with her family above the Chinese takeaway that her parents run, who's trying to fit in with their peers at school, wants to become an artist, but is also having to deal with the cultural difference of being at home with her Chinese family that have very, very different moral standards and expectations. And of course, they're just a young kid, you know, and we've all got our shit to deal with when we're growing up and with hormonal and puberty and all that good stuff. As someone that is biracial and did have all of those things growing up, this is an excellent representation of how uncomfortable and awkward and confusing it can be, trying to figure out who you are while having two different cultures telling you what you should be instead. I'm not going to go in depth with any other Chinese young adult books right now, but I am going to pop up some graphics for you to screenshot if you want to look into any of these yourself. These were all written by authors that are ethnically Chinese, and I'm so excited about all of them. Moving back to adult literature, I have some literary fiction that I want to talk to you about. The first book is I Am China by Guo Xiaolu. This one particularly stood out to me when I first found out about it because Guo is my mum's surname. This story is very, very interestingly told because it follows the romance between a young Chinese couple through letters that have been discovered by a translator living in London. Iona is at home in London above a noisy London market, and she's sick of her life, and as she starts to translate these letters, she starts to feel more and more alive when these young lovers that can't be together are growing further and further apart. It's a romance, but it also deals with politics. There's a lot of state police involvement in the plot as well, and with it being literary fiction, of course, you can expect it to have been written beautifully. The next book I want to talk about is another one by Yan Lianke, who I mentioned in the sci-fi section. He wrote The Day the Sun Died. This one is called Dream of Ding Village, which I believe is coming out soon with Penguin. The translator for this is Cindy Carter, and thank you for your hard work because this book was officially censored upon its Chinese publication and is apparently one of Yan Lianke's most important novels to date. Set in a poor village in Henan province, it is a deeply moving and beautifully written account of the blood-selling ring in contemporary China. Based on a real-life blood-selling scandal in eastern China, Dream of Ding Village is the result of 3 years of undercover work by Yan Lianke as a result of unregulated blood selling. The result is a passionate and steely critique of the rate at which China is developing and what happens to those who get in the way. This next book I want to talk about is one that, again, I didn't know about until I started researching, and it is called The Wongs versus the World by Jade Chung. Now, this follows a family who became very, very rich and wealthy in America, but because of the money, stocks and things, they lost all of their money, and the dad wants to take his family back to China to try and reclaim their ancestral lands and start anew there. But with the kids having been brought up in America, things aren't as easy as they initially seemed. It sounds like an amazing story, again, about the clashing cultures. For this next one, I can't find the author's name written in Chinese, so I'm not going to be pronouncing this correctly, but this is a mystery thriller called A Perfect Crime by Ah Yi, translated by Anna Holmwood. Content warning for, I guess, like, gore. I will read you the blurb on the back. A chilling literary thriller about a motiveless murder in provincial China. On a normal day in provincial China, a teenager goes about his regular business, but he's also planning the brutal murder of his only friend. He lures her over, strangles her, stuffs her body into the washing machine and flees town, whereupon a perilous game of cat and mouse begins. Apparently, it perfectly echoes Kafka's absurdism, Camus' nihilism, and Dostoevsky's depravity. Ooh! Next, onto the memoirs and non-fiction. The first one I want to talk about is Once Upon a Time in the East, A Story of Growing Up by Guo Xiaolu, who is an author that we mentioned earlier on. Guo Xiaolu meets her parents for the first time when she is 6. They are strangers to her. When Xiaolu is born, her parents hand her over to a childless peasant couple in the mountains. Aged 2 and suffering from malnutrition on a diet of yam leaves, they leave Xiaolu with her illiterate grandparents in a fishing village on the East China Sea. it's a strange beginning. Like a wild swans for a new generation, which I will talk about in a moment. Once upon a time in the East takes Xiaolu from a run-down shack to film school in a rapidly changing Beijing, navigating the everyday peculiarity of modern China. Censorship, underground art, Western boyfriends. Guo Xiaolu's extraordinary memoir is a handbook of life lessons. How to be an artist when censorship kills creativity. How to be a woman when female babies are rapidly drowned at birth and sexual abuse is commonplace. Most poignantly of all, how to love when you've never been shown how. In that description just then, another book was mentioned, and that is Wild Swans by Zheng Rong, which is written like Zhang Cheng for English-speaking people. Most famously, she wrote Wild Swans, 3 Generations of China, and more recently came out with another memoir called Big Sister, Little Sister, Red Sister, 3 Women at the Heart of 20th Century China. Next is Mao's Last Dancer, a memoir by Li Cunxin. No, it's not. Apologies from editing Tazmyn. It's actually Li Cunxin. This follows the story of a young boy who was plucked from rural China to go and study ballet because, I don't know, they thought he'd be particularly good at it, and they went, "Fuck your family, come with us and show the world how amazing China is." He was then sent to America to train, where he fell in love with the country and fell in love with an American woman, and he then defected to America. He quickly became one of the most famous ballet dancers in the world, and this is his story about his experience. Now, to fly through the other non-fiction picks, I have Mao, the Unknown Story, again by Zheng Rong and her Irish husband John Halliday. This is possibly the most detailed and researched book about Mao that there is. Next is one that I got really recently, and that is One Child, the story of China's most radical experiment by Mei Fong, in which Mei goes out and interviews lots of people from loads of different backgrounds within China that have been impacted by the one-child policy. Then Factory Girls, From Village to City in a Changing China by Leslie T. Chung, and The Corpse Walker, Real Stories, China from the Bottom Up by Liao Yi Wu. And that's it. If you have made it all the way to the end of this video, then put a little Chinese fortune cookie, that's what they're called, emoji down below so that I know that you are here. And if you want even more Chinese literature recommendations in the future and all sorts of book recommendations in general, then feel free to pop over to my channel and see if you like more of my face. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. Bye.